You are listening to continuing coverage of the trial of Chad Daybell from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast. Let's go back to the courtroom.
Did Lori ever talk to you about her conversations with Chad?
Yes.
Do you know, did Lori ever share with you if she turned to Chad for advice?
She did.
And we talked a little bit about the multiple lives or multiple probations already, correct?
Yes.
At some point, did Chad or Lori share more information about that with you?
Yes.
And which one of them?
They both did.
Do you know which one of them seemed to have the most understanding regarding multiple probations?
Yes, Lori would often call Chad, and Chad would give her the information, and then she would come back and share it with me and her other friends.
And when she would share the information, would she tell you she got that from Chad?
Yeah.
At some point, did Chad or Lori talk to you about the concept of light and dark?
Yes.
Do you recall who talked to you about that?
Lori shared it with me.
Did she tell you where she got that information from?
She got it from Chad.
What did she share with you about the concept of light and dark?
So if someone was light, they had made contracts with Jesus Christ before they came here. And if they were dark, they had made contracts and promises with Satan. And it was a different scale level of how dark or light they were.
So it was a decision before they came here to Earth?
Yes.
Contract?
Initially, yes.
And then with regard to the multiple probations, as you learned more about that, what did Lori share with you regarding multiple probations?
That people lived multiple times. And then she would find out, she would try to find out like when that was.
And was there some kind of a rating system or a system to easily identify if someone was light or dark or what level they were?
She would ask him and he would somehow find out. And he would find out, how many times they'd been on this planet or any other planets, I guess. And he would just find that out by asking questions the way he did. And then she would share it with us.
And the he you're referring to, is that Chad?
Yes.
At some point, were people designated with a number and then either an L or a D?
Correct.
Where would those designations originate?
From Chad.
And if someone was designated a D, did that stand for dark?
Correct.
And the L was for light?
Correct.
At some point, did Lori also share with you that she believed she had a mission here on Earth?
Yes.
What did she share with you she believed her mission to be?
She felt that it was her mission to gather women to the 144,000, and that she would be the leader of it. At some point, she thought she was going to lead that.
And when we talk about the 144,000, what's that in reference to? Could you explain a little bit?
Yes, it's a biblical explanation for a certain amount of people that would go out and gather Israel in the last days and have the power and authority to do that.
So gathering people in the end times.
Correct.
Do you know where Lori got the idea or the belief that she was meant to be one of the leaders or help gather?
I think she got it from herself.
Do you know if did she ever tell you if she talked to Chad about that?
She did.
What did she tell you in relation to that, if you recall?
Well, she shared with him what she believed she was, which was the gatherer of that. And then he agreed that she was. And so he, told her that that's what her mission was.
Do you know if Lori was telling other people about light and dark and multiple probations as well?
She was.
Do you know some of the other individuals she shared that with?
Yes. Sulema, Serena, Nicole, and Christina, and Melanie, and just maybe a few other people that are not as significant.
Did she also share these ideas with Alex?
Yes.
Do you know if Chad ever shared these ideas with any of those individuals? If I may respond.
Okay, and I'll note on the record, it didn't pick up on the microphone. It's an objection based on lack of foundation. Ms. Blake, response.
Your Honor, I specifically ask if she knows. I'm asking her personal knowledge.
All right, well, she can answer the question if she knows, but not necessarily go into what she knows, because I do think there's no foundation at this point for what.
Do you know if Chad ever shared those teachings or beliefs with any of those individuals?
Yes.
And did he?
Yes.
Were you present?
Yes.
And again, when Lori would tell you these things, she would explain she received the information from Chad.
Yes.
And we talked about that gathering in November at Lori's house. Were some of these things talked about then?
Yes.
Was Chad present?
Yes.
Was Lori present?
Yes.
Were they both talking about these ideas?
Yes.
Had you heard of these concepts before?
Yes.
Had you heard of them in the way that Chad was teaching them?
No.
At the time, were you open to learning more about these things?
Yes.
Did Lori or Chad ever talk to you about if a person could switch from being light to dark or vice versa?
Yes.
What did they tell you regarding that?
That they might be light, for example, and then some maybe evil entity could enter them and then they would become dark.
So a light person could become dark.
That's right.
When they, and I say they, do you recall if it was Lori or Chad that would tell you these things?
She would tell me.
And would she tell you where she received the information?
Yes. She went to Chad with it.
Thank you. Do you recall when Lori first started talking to you about people becoming dark?
I would say sometime between January and February of 2019.
Do you recall the first person she talked to you about becoming dark? The first specific person?
Yes, it was Charles Vallow.
Did she tell you where she received that information?
Yes, she received it from Chad.
At some point, did she talk to you more about what it meant if the evil spirit came in, like where the actual person went?
So when a dark spirit would take over, the original spirit of the person would go into the spirit world.
And that's what she originally told you?
That's right.
And did she tell you she received that information from Chad?
Yes.
So was your understanding the body of that person was still alive?
Correct.
It just had a different dark spirit in it now?
Correct.
What did Lori originally talk to you about? Was there a way to do something to help that person?
She would try to do like a casting out of an evil spirit and try to convince the spirit the evil spirit to leave.
Do you know where she got the concept of casting from?
I believe she got it from energy work.
At some point, did you learn if Charles had been designated a different name?
Yes.
What was that name?
Ned Snyder.
Do you know where that name came from?
Chad told that to Lori.
At some point, had Lori talked to you about her having a dream regarding Charles?
Yes.
What had she told you?
She said that when it was after Christmas and he was out of town, I believe he went to Texas and he took JJ. And she had a dream during that time that they were not going to come back, that they were going to get in a car accident. And that's what she saw.
And that they would be Charles and JJ?
Correct.
Did she believe Charles was going to be killed in that accident?
She did.
Was Charles killed in a car accident?
No.
Was it sometime after that he was labeled dark?
Yes.
Judge, how about some foundation?
Your Honor, it's a question to her personal knowledge. I guess I can rephrase.
Go ahead, Ms. Blake. Thank you.
At some point, did you learn or did Lori tell you if he was labeled dark once he did not pass away in that accident?
Yes.
And again, Judge, if I could have some time, date, place.
You'd like to lay additional foundation, you may, Ms. Blake?
Do you recall approximately when Lori told you or when you learned Charles was not killed in an accident?
January 2019.
And do you recall approximately, I think you've already said, but do you recall approximately when you were told Charles was dark?
It was, I would say, weeks after that.
And that designation came from Chad?
Correct.
And then we started talking a little bit about the idea of casting.
Right.
Did you ever participate in any castings?
I did.
Can you tell me a little bit about what would happen at the casting?
So Lori and a few of her friends would stand in a circle and then feel like they had the power and authority to cast out the evil spirit by trying to use words, I guess, like an energy work to be able to convince them to leave and hoping that the evil spirit would leave.
So would some of the individuals say a prayer?
Yeah. Mhm.
Would some of the individuals talk about sending spiritual weapons or something of that nature?
Yes.
Was the person that the casting was being done on physically present?
No.
Was anyone physically touching, doing anything to, in this case, Charles?
No.
Do you recall, did you participate in the castings for Charles?
Yes.
At any point, did Lori tell you whether or not the casting was successful?
Yes.
And what did she share with you?
She would say that Ned had left, and then shortly after, she would say somebody else got in, another entity.
Do you know who told her that information or where she got it from?
Yes, she got it from Chad.
And did she tell you that?
Yes.
At some point, did you learn what would happen to the body if the casting was actually successful?
She would say that the body was supposed to die if the evil spirit left.
So in Charles' case, Ned's out and a new spirit's in.
Correct.
Do you know if there were additional castings
Yes.
in relation to Charles, I should say?
Yes.
Did you participate in any additional castings?
Yes.
Do you know if at any point the next entity or spirit was cast out of Charles, according to Lori?
Yes.
And was it?
According to her, it was.
And did she tell you where she received that information?
From Chad.
And then what happened in relation to Charles when that next entity was removed, according to Lori?
Nothing happened to Charles.
Did a new entity come in?
According to her.
And did she tell you where she learned that from?
Yes, Chad.
Was Chad ever present for any of the castings?
Yes.
Were there castings done on other individuals besides Charles that you know of?
Yes.
And who were some of those individuals?
Brandon Boudreaux was one that I know of.
And did you participate in a casting on Brandon Boudreaux?
I don't know if I said anything. I was there when they did it.
Do you know if Chad was present at that one?
Yes, he was.
And who was Brandon Boudreaux?
He was Lori's niece's, which her name is Melanie's husband.
Had you met Brandon?
Yes.
At any point, did you learn if Brandon had been designated as dark?
Yes.
And had he?
According to her.
Did she tell you where she received that information?
Yes, from Chad.
Do you know if any castings were ever done on Tammy Daybell?
Yes.
Were you present for them that you recall?
I don't recall.
Do you know if castings were done on Tylee or JJ?
Not that I know of.
You were not involved in any if they were?
I don't recall any of that.
And the castings in relation to Charles, do you recall approximately what period of time those were occurring?
So sometime between January and February 2019 up until, I don't know, probably before he died.
And was your understanding that if the casting was successful, the body would naturally expire?
Yes.
Were you ever told that there would be violence done to the body?
Never.
Were there other individuals that were involved in the castings besides you?
Yes.
Did some of them seem to have more involvement?
Yes.
And do you recall who seemed to be more involved in the castings?
Lori and Sulema seemed to know the most about it.
And the casting that we talked about Chad being present for, do you recall where that would have occurred?
Yes.
Where was that?
That was in Arizona.
Are you aware when Charles Vallow was killed?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that was?
July 11th, 2019.
So this would have been subsequent to the castings taking place?
Yes, right. Shortly after.
At some point, did you start to believe or believe that Charles may be possessed?
To some level, yes.
And how many times had you met Charles?
Just a handful times.
Would you say you knew him very well?
No, I didn't know him very well.
Is it fair to say most of the information you had about Charles came from Lori?
Yes,
Do you recall sometime in July staying at Lori's residence?
I do.
And do you recall her asking you to leave at some point?
Yes.
Why did she tell you needed to leave?
So I woke up early in the morning and she told me I needed to leave because Charles was going to be coming down. He's driving in from Texas and that he was going to kill her.
Did she tell you anything that she was going to do, any precautionary steps she was going to take?
I believe she said that Alex was going to be there to help protect her.
Did you have an opportunity to observe Alex and Lori together?
Yes.
How would you describe their relationship or your observations?
Close brother and sister relationship.
Anything about it seems strange to you?
No, it seemed normal to me.
Just close.
Yeah, really close.
And you talked about her saying Alex was going to come to protect her.
Yeah.
At any point, did you learn if someone had designated Alex as Lori's protector?
Yes.
What did you learn about that?
So as Chad would share with Lori that his mission in life, according to what he learned, was to protect Lori. That was why he came here.
So Chad had designated Alex as Lori's protector.
That's right.
And Lori was going to have Alex stay to protect her from Charles.
I believe so.
Did you ever hear Charles threaten her?
No,
Were you present when Charles was killed?
no.
At some point later, did you talk to Lori about that?
Yes.
What did she share with you about the killing of Charles?
She told me that he came in from Texas and that they were arguing. And she said he put his cell phone in the car and she grabbed it, ran in the house. He was really upset with her. They were standing around the kitchen. He was threatening her. Tylee had a bat and she was trying to protect her mom or herself, I'm not sure. And then Charles and Alex got in a physical fight, and then Alex went to the bedroom to get his gun to defend himself.
And was it your understanding, or were you told that Alex then shot and killed Charles?
That's what they told. That's what she told me.
And did you also talk to Alex about what had happened?
Yes.
And do you recall what he shared with you?
I believe he shared the same story. I don't remember all the detail to it, but it was the same story.
Do you recall how close in time it was after Charles' death that you talked to Lori and or Alex?
It felt like about 4 days afterwards.
When you talked to Lori and Alex, were they together?
Well, at first I talked to her on the telephone, so I don't know if he was there or not.
And then later when you talked to Alex, was Lori present?
I don't know if it was the first time I saw her or not. It could have been. Could have been the next time. I'm not really sure.
But at some point around 4 days later, you talked to both Lori and Alex.
Well, for sure her, but I can't remember when I talked to him. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
When you talked to Lori, it's just 4 days later. Any sign of sadness?
No.
Any sign of grief?
No.
How did she seem?
Happy.
When you talked to Alex, any sign of remorse?
A little thoughtful, little unsure of himself.
At some point after Charles is shot and killed, did you see Chad Daybell again?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how long after?
So it must have been a couple of weeks after Charles's death. He was in Arizona at Lori's house.
So just a couple weeks after Charles' death, Chad Daybell's down in that house.
Correct.
Do you know at that time if Tammy Daybell was still alive?
She was.
Do you know where Chad stayed when he was back down in Arizona?
I believe it was Lori's house.
Did you have an opportunity to observe he and Lori together?
Yes.
What observations did you make?
They seemed super excited to be together. They were standing, talking to several of us at the kitchen table, and they're standing side by side and, excited to share, their future plans together.
Any sign of grief from Chad?
No.
And you talked about they were excited to share their future plans together.
Yeah.
So Chad and Lori were planning a future together?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And Tammy was still alive?
Yes.
And Judge, I'm just looking at the time here. It's almost 10. I don't know if the court wants to take a break at this point.
I was
Or keep
thinking anytime between now and 10:15 or whenever you feel like is a logical break point is fine.
I think this may be a logical break point.
Okay, let's go ahead and take our mid-morning recess then. And it's right about 10, so we will resume right back about 10:30 with further testimony.
All rise, please.
Witness the lies,
I didn't lie to you on that polygraph, I promise.
the cover-ups,
I could see his brain on
the moments they confessed,
I grabbed one of the kitchen knives. I killed him.
outrageous police interrogations.
I know, I forgot the head. I wanted the head.
You have to see to believe.
Oh my God.
Law and crime interrogations. Subscribe today.
District Court, again in session.
Thank you. Please be seated. We have the jurors brought back in, please.
All rise, please. The jury is present and accounted for.
Okay, thank you. Please be seated. All right, we're back on the record on case CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Daybell. I'll note that the witness, Ms. Gibb, is still under oath. The state's continuing with direct examination. We just concluded our mid-morning recess. It went slightly longer than anticipated. I had a matter I took up with counsel on a sidebar that was reported in the case. I believe we're ready to commence then with further examination. And Ms. Blake, just for scheduling purposes, we do want to take a lunch break today, approximately noon, if that works out with your scheduling.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll watch the clock.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Miss Gibb, before we took the break, we'd been talking about the killing of Charles and your observation shortly after that. Prior to Charles' death, did you and Lori have conversations about her relationship with Chad?
Yes. Yes.
Do you recall if she shared with you the nature of their relationship?
Yes.
And what did she share with you, if you recall?
That they really loved each other. They had been in multiple lives. They had missions together. That there was some physical affection, contact.
And this was when Charles was still living as well?
Yes.
And we talked about when Chad came back down, or when Chad came down to Arizona after Charles had been killed, Lori and Chad talking about plans for a future together.
Right.
Did that include talk of the missions that you just referenced?
Yes.
Your Honor, I believe we already went over that before the break. If you'd like me to go over it again.
If that's a objection, then it's overruled.
And she shared with you that there was some kind of physicalness within their relationship.
Correct.
Did she tell you whether or not she thought that was okay because they were both married?
Yes. She said that every time she would get together with Chad, she would always ask Jesus if what was acceptable or appropriate that she could interact with Chad.
And if she felt she had the affirmation that it was okay, then she would do it?
I assume.
Did she tell you where they would meet up?
Hotels.
Did you ever talk to Chad or Lori about whether either of them were seeking a divorce?
Yes.
What did you learn in relation to that?
I asked why weren't they getting a divorce, and she told me that if Chad were to seek after a divorce, that he would be in trouble with Jesus, that he would lose his exaltations.
Did she tell you where she got that information?
She got it from Chad.
Do you know if Charles had started any divorce proceedings?
Oh, yes, I believe so.
But Lori didn't.
Correct.
Did you ever see Lori with more than one phone?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how many phones you saw her with?
3.
Did she ever tell you anything about why she had 3 phones?
One was her own personal phone, and then one was she just had a connection with Chad through the other phone, and I'm not sure about the other one.
So one of the phones was to communicate with Chad.
Yes.
Did you ever learn if Chad had more than one phone?
I remember she saying he had a special phone just for her, but that's all I remember.
Did Lori ever share with you how often she and Chad were in contact?
It was mostly daily. I'm sure there was times where she said, she couldn't contact him for certain reasons, but mostly it was daily.
And would that have been approximately since they met that they stayed in that type of contact, if you know?
Yes, that I know of.
And we talked about Lori telling you Chad had shared with her that they'd been married in prior lives.
That's right.
Did she ever tell you specific names that they had in prior lives or who they were?
Yes.
What were some of those that she shared with you?
I'm trying to remember her names. I'm not remembering her names. I remember certain positions, though.
And what were those positions?
She was married to Moroni, and she was married to James, and she was she was Chad's wife, but he was James, and she was, I think, Elena. And then Chad was considered to be Methuselah, and she was his daughter, I believe, but I don't remember a name. Seemed like there was another time she was a lady that was married to a relative of Joseph Smith, but I can't recall her name right now. I can't, and there could have been another one. I'm just not recalling it.
And when you say you remember positions, were those biblical or figures within some scriptures?
Yes.
When she was Elena, do you know who Chad was supposed to have been in that life?
James, one of the apostles of Jesus Christ.
And is that one of the times that they were married in a previous life?
Yes.
Did she tell you where she learned that information?
From Chad.
Did she ever tell you how Chad would get his information?
She said that he would sit in his portal and ask questions.
Did you ever see the portal that was referenced?
Yes. Oh, well, not his, but hers. Yeah.
And what did you observe in relation to Lori's portal?
It was nothing but, just a spot in her closet. I mean, it didn't look like anything. She just considered it her portal, but it looked like just a regular space.
And who told her that was a portal?
Chad told her and taught her about it.
Had Lori ever talked to you about portals before meeting Chad?
I can't recall.
Do you recall when the last time you saw Tylee was?
In Arizona, July or August of 2019.
And after Charles' death, at some point, do you recall Lori leaving Arizona?
Yes.
Do you know where she relocated?
She relocated to Rexburg.
Did she ever talk to you about why she left to Arizona to go to Rexburg?
Yes, she wanted to be with Chad and start their missions together.
Do you know whose idea it was for her to go to Idaho? Did she share that with you?
I can't remember if it was hers or both of theirs.
But she wanted to go to be with Chad?
Correct.
And when she left to go to Idaho, to the best of your knowledge, was Tammy still alive?
She was.
We had talked about people being light and dark. Do you recall if Lori ever said anything to you in relation to Tylee and whether or not what her level was or her rating?
She did say she was dark at some point. I don't remember the rating.
Do you know who gave her that information?
I'm guessing it was Chad. I don't remember.
Generally speaking, would she tell you she turned to Chad for these answers?
Yeah.
Did you know of anything else Chad used to get answers?
Yes, one time I saw him with a pendulum.
Do you recall what the pendulum looked like?
It was gold, I think, or brass, and it had like a pointiness to the bottom of it and like a string.
Do you recall when you saw that?
That was in February of 2019.
Do you recall where you were?
Yeah, I was here in Boise, Idaho.
And do you recall why you were in Boise?
Yeah, there was a conference that weekend that I came to.
Do you recall who was present with you that you associated with at that conference?
Yes, Chad was there, and Sulema, Serena, and Audrey. And there were a lot of other people, but that was in the little small circle of friends.
Were those the individuals around when you saw the pendulum?
Right, correct.
I didn't hear you mention Lori. Was she there?
No.
Do you know where she was?
She was in Hawaii, I believe.
When Lori moved to Idaho, do you recall who went with her?
JJ and Tylee, and Alex. He was either there before or after. I don't know. I know at some point he was up there.
So Alex, her brother, moved around the same time she did?
Yeah. Yes.
And this is after Charles has been killed, correct?
Correct.
And it's after Chad has told Alex that he's Lori's protector. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Do you recall if you ever spoke to Lori after she'd moved to Idaho?
Yes.
Do you recall if you heard anyone in the background when you talked to her?
Yes, she was in her apartment playing games with Alex and Tylee.
So you heard Tylee in the background when you talked to her?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that would have been?
August or September, not sure.
Would it have been shortly after they'd moved to Rexburg?
Yes, they just moved in.
At some point after Lori and Alex and the children moved to Idaho, did you end up visiting Lori?
I did.
Do you recall approximately when that was?
The weekend of September 22nd.
And was that of 2019?
Correct.
Do you recall why you ended up coming to Idaho during that weekend?
Yes, there was a conference in town, and then I was going to record a podcast with her.
Had you and Lori recorded podcasts before?
Yes.
When you came to Idaho, where did you end up staying?
At Lori's house.
And did you drive or fly? Do you recall?
I flew.
Who picked you up at the airport?
At Lori.
When you got to Lori's house during that weekend, who was present?
Alex was there and JJ was there. And then occasionally Chad would come over.
And then was there an individual named David Warwick that also ended up there?
Oh, yes.
And who was David Warwick?
He's my husband now.
And at the time?
He was my boyfriend.
Do you know if Alex had his own apartment as well?
Yes.
And he did?
He did.
But he would be at Lori's at times?
Yes.
I didn't hear you say anything about Tylee. Did you ever see Tylee when you arrived in Idaho?
No.
Did you ask Lori at any point where Tylee was?
Yes.
What were you told?
I was told that she was at the BYU Idaho campus at school, and she got roommates with some girls that she was able to get her in.
Did Lori talk any more about Tylee while you were there?
No.
Did you ever see Tylee come visit?
No.
Ever hear Lori on the phone with her?
No.
Do you know whose room you stayed in while you were there?
Tylee's.
Were a lot of Tylee's items in the room?
Nothing was in there. That was clothing or anything, just furniture.
Did Lori talk to you about JJ while you were there?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
She told me that the day before I arrived that he became dark.
So previously she'd told you Tylee was dark.
Correct.
Correct?
Yeah.
And now JJ was dark.
Correct.
Did you observe JJ that weekend?
Yes.
Did you observe any behaviors that caused you concern?
No.
Do you recall her telling you why she believed he was dark?
Either Chad told her or she figured it out herself. I'm thinking it was Chad, but I'm not remembering.
And Chad was present at times that weekend,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Was he present when there was talk of JJ being dark?
It's possible.
Did you ever observe any interactions between JJ and Chad while you were there?
Yes.
And what were those?
JJ seemed to be upset, and so Chad took him upstairs with him, and they went into.
All right, I'll construe that as an objection based on foundation. Ms. Blake.
Ms. Gibb, do you recall approximately when in your visit the interaction occurred?
I feel like it was Thursday. Like I got there on a Wednesday, I believe. I feel like it was the next day.
And I guess for reference, how long were you there at Lori's?
From Wednesday to Monday morning.
So best of your recollection, this is around your second or your first full day there.
I think so.
And if you could go ahead and tell us again what you observed.
Okay. He took him upstairs, and then after a period of time, he came back downstairs. I believe he was holding his hand, and that's what I observed with them.
Did you observe any injuries to Chad?
He had a red scratch on his neck.
Did he tell you how he got that?
I asked him, and he said that JJ had scratched him.
Had you seen many interactions between Chad and JJ before that?
No.
When you were there, you talked about Chad coming and going. Did he stay the night to the best of your knowledge?
No, I never noticed that.
And this weekend that you're there, Tammy was still alive. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you ever hear Chad talk about Tammy?
A little bit.
Do you recall what you heard?
Chad and David Warwick were speaking at the island, and David was asking him questions about Tammy, and Chad said, please don't share this with anybody, my relationship with Lori. And so David asked questions about the relationship he had with Tammy.
Ms. Blake, objection based on foundation.
Your Honor, I think she's recalling events from that weekend. So we do have a narrowed time frame. I can ask a follow-up question, but it's based on her personal knowledge.
I'll sustain the objection if you want to ask additional foundational questions, Ms. Blake.
Do you recall approximately when you heard this conversation between David and Chad during your stay?
It would have been on the weekend because David was there already. He didn't come until Friday, so it could have been like on a Saturday or Sunday.
So sometime around Saturday or Sunday?
Yes.
And what did you hear Chad say about Tammy?
That she was a good wife, I believe. I'm not recalling right now what he said.
Do you recall him ever mentioning that he was going to divorce her?
Never heard that.
Ever hear him talk about getting separated?
No.
Did you observe Chad and Lori interact while you were there?
Yes.
Did you observe them interact several times through your stay?
Yes.
What were your observations of their interactions?
They seemed to be a couple that was close and loved each other. There was affection, hugging. I saw her kiss him on the cheek. They were singing together, maybe a little dancing.
So affectionate with each other.
Yes.
Do you recall ever seeing them act affectionate outside of the apartment?
Yes.
What do you recall about that?
We were walking around the campus and they were holding hands.
Campus is pretty broad, Ms. Blake.
When you refer to campus, do you know which campus that was?
The BYU Idaho.
All right.
The BYU Idaho campus is what you said?
Yes.
I'm going to pause so you can take a drink.
Thank you.
And do you recall approximately when you went and walked the track during your time in Idaho?
It was really in the beginning, so it was either Wednesday night or Thursday night.
And what did you observe between them at the BYU Idaho track?
Very affectionate and loving towards each other.
Did you ever ask them or did they ever say anything to you about that?
I asked them if they were concerned, if they were worried if Tammy might see them together, and she let me know that Tammy, wasn't aware of his personal life like that, where he went.
But again, no indication of divorce or separation.
Correct.
Did Lori ever talk to you about September 22nd having any kind of special meaning to her?
Yes.
What did she tell you about that?
She told me that it was an anniversary for her of when she saw Moroni in the temple.
And do you recall the last time you saw JJ?
It was the Sunday night, the 22nd.
What was happening the last time you saw him, if you remember?
I was in the house, Lori's house, and I was doing a recording with Lori and David, and Alex walked in the door holding JJ on his shoulder and was taking him to bed. He had fallen asleep.
And did you see where Alex put JJ to bed?
No.
Do you know which room JJ normally slept in?
He often slept with his mom in the corner of her room. There was a little spot that she would put a bed in there for him. But he also had his own bedroom too.
Did he sleep in his bedroom that night?
No.
And how do you know that?
Because I was in that bedroom, then JJ's bedroom, so he wasn't in there.
And you talked earlier, you were going to stay in Tylee's room.
Right.
Can you tell us why you ended up in JJ's room?
So I was, slept often in Tylee's room. And then when David got there, him and I We were in the same room that night together talking and reading scriptures and going to bed.
So did David have his things in JJ's room?
Yeah.
So was it your understanding JJ was put to bed in Lori's room that night?
Yes.
What, if anything, happened that night out of the ordinary?
David woke up with just a panic. He had a really bad dream, like a nightmare, and he was very disturbed by it. And I asked him, what was going on, what he experienced. And so I was concerned, and I thought I could call out and see if I can get some help from Lori and Chad to see if they could give him a priesthood blessing of comfort.
Judge, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first word. Should give him a what blessing?
Priesthood blessing.
Okay.
Did you, in fact, try to contact Chad?
Yes.
How did you try to contact him?
Text or phone call.
Did he respond?
No.
And would this have been in the early morning hours?
Sometime in the early morning.
Did you attempt to make contact with Lori?
Yes.
And how did you try to do that?
The same. Text and phone call. And then I went to her room to see if she was there, and it was locked.
Did she respond to the text or phone call?
No.
And then her bedroom door was locked.
Correct.
You have no way to know who was on the other side?
No.
Did anyone ever open the door for you?
No.
And you said that was on the 22nd.
Correct.
Did you see JJ the next day?
No.
Did you ever see JJ again?
No.
After Charles was killed, did Lori ever share with you how she was going to survive financially?
She talked about money she received from JJ from his Social Security. She talked about, she talked about, I think, was it Social Security for Charles? And then we talked about insurance a little bit, but I'm not sure if that's what you're thinking of.
So do you know if she ever received any life insurance for Charles?
I don't think so.
So to the best of your knowledge, she was living off the Social Security money?
Yeah, to my knowledge.
Do you know if Lori ever got a job when she came to Idaho?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Did she ever tell you that she had a job lined up and that's why she was moving to Idaho?
No.
At some point, did Lori talk to you about some struggles with JJ?
Yes.
What did she share with you about that?
She said that he was acting out more as far as the weekend that I was there in September, that he was acting like he was possessed. He was, 1 minute he would be upset. 1 minute she would say he was talking very intelligent, just a variety of different behaviors. She seemed troubled by it, that he had been taken over by evil spirit, that he was upsetting. I don't know. She just seemed kind of upset by it.
Did she ever indicate any kind of a plan of how she was going to handle that?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
She said that she wanted Kay to have JJ.
Did she ever talk to you about a plan to get JJ to Kay?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
She said that she wanted to meet together with her in the airport and talk to her about her, like she had cancer or something like that, and that if she would take him or a relative that was close by to Kay's family that would take him.
And did Lori talk to you about coming up with what to tell Kay to get her to take JJ?
Yeah, we talked about that.
And did you help her come up with an idea to tell Kay that Lori was sick and so she needed Kay to take JJ?
She was throwing different ideas out with me, and so we talked about that kind of scenario. Yeah.
Was it your understanding that Lori actually did in fact contact Kay? Is that what she told you?
Yes, she did.
Did she tell you that in fact she had given JJ to Kay?
She did.
And we go back to the last time you saw JJ is the night of September 22nd.
Yes.
That next morning, did Lori say anything in relation to where JJ was that day?
I believe she said that David remembers this more than I do, but that he was with Alex that morning.
And is it sometime after that that Lori leads you to believe that she sent JJ to be with Kay?
Yes.
Did Lori talk to you about how she transferred JJ to Kay, the custody?
Yes.
And how was that?
She said they met up in the Salt Lake City airport and she took JJ.
And we talked, actually, let me back up. Sometime later in So you're there in September.
Mhm.
Did you continue to be in contact with Lori after that trip?
Yes.
Did you ever hear JJ in the background on any phone calls?
No.
Do you recall getting a call from Chad sometime in November of
Yes.
2019?
Yes.
Do you recall where you were when you got that call?
Yes, I was in Utah.
Do you recall approximately when it was?
I felt like it was like 2 or 3 days before Thanksgiving.
Do you recall what Chad told you or why he was calling?
Yes.
And why was that?
He told me that the Rexburg police were going to call me and ask about JJ.
What, if anything, did he tell you to do in regards to that?
He asked me not to pick up the phone and talk to them.
Did he tell you why he thought the police were going to call you?
Because he said that Lori had told the police that I had JJ.
How did Chad sound in that phone call?
Nervous.
Did you have JJ?
No.
Did you ask Chad where JJ was at that time?
I said, he's not with Kay, and he said no.
And prior to that, where had Lori told you JJ was?
He was with Kay.
Did Chad tell you anything else that you recall?
He said that Lori would shortly be calling me after that, but she was talking to the police. Well, I can't remember right now everything else. It was very brief.
Do you recall if Chad indicated where he was when he placed that phone call?
I don't recall.
Did you learn at some point where Chad and Lori were? What state?
Oh, Idaho.
Did Lori, in fact, end up reaching out to you?
She did.
Do you recall what she told you?
When she answered the phone, or when I answered the phone, she was very positive and upbeat, as if everything was okay. And she said that she was protecting Tylee and JJ because Kay and others were trying to kidnap him, so that's why. And she told me to go to a Frozen movie and take a picture to act like there's other kids like I had him.
And did law enforcement, in fact, try to reach out to you?
They did.
Did you answer initially?
Initially, no.
Do you recall at any point if Lori, Alex, or Chad had told you anything regarding law enforcement?
At some point, yes. I can't remember the beginning, but I remember having a phone conversation with Alex, or maybe it was in person, that the police had come to his house and Melanie's house to ransack his house. And they came questioning, asking about where JJ was.
At any point, were you told whether or not law enforcement were dark?
Yes.
And what were you told in regards to that?
I remember Alex saying they were considered dark translated beings.
And again, who was it that was able to determine if someone was dark, from your understanding?
From my understanding, it was Chad.
So initially, you don't answer the call from law enforcement. Why was that?
Because I absolutely did not know and understand what to do about it.
At some point, did you end up talking to law enforcement?
I did.
What did you initially tell them in relation to JJ?
So when I called Gilbert Police, I initially told them I had JJ, but then I didn't have him. He was back with Lori.
So initially you complied a little bit with what Lori had asked.
Correct.
Is that fair?
Yes.
At some point, did you make contact with law enforcement again?
Yes.
And did you end up making contact with them through an attorney?
Initially.
Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
So right after I discovered that I needed to go talk to the police, the day I was going to go, I had a phone call from a friend who I hadn't talked to in about a year or two. He was an attorney, happened to be an attorney, and he felt impressed. He told me to call me out of the blue. I mean, no knowledge of this case had been revealed to the public, so he wouldn't have known to call me. And then I felt to share a little bit about what was going on. And so he said, I should probably do a a child, what do they call that? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name.
Are you thinking welfare check?
Welfare check. And I really wasn't sure what that meant because I've never been involved in that kind of dynamic before. So, yeah.
And did that friend of yours, the attorney, reach out to law enforcement and request a welfare check?
Yes.
At this point in time, did you have concerns about JJ's well-being?
Yes.
Did you have concerns about Tylee's well-being?
Yes.
Did you end up sitting down with law enforcement later and telling them more about in regards to whether or not JJ was ever with you?
Yes, I told him everything.
And did you do that without an attorney?
Yes.
And did you in fact tell them JJ had never been with you?
Correct.
Did you learn who had made or who had initially reported the children missing?
I'm sorry.
Did you ever learn who had reported the children or JJ missing?
Are you referring to like maybe Kay contacting the police? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you learn that?
I think so. I think so.
So originally, Lori told you she'd given JJ to Kay. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then later she told you Kay was going to try to kidnap JJ.
Right.
Did Lori disclose the location of JJ to you at that time?
No.
At some point, did you end up, or let me back up. After those calls from Chad and Lori around Thanksgiving, did you have further contact with Chad and or Lori?
So after, yes, after I went to I went to Arizona for Thanksgiving, and Dave and I pulled over and called them because we were really concerned and wanted to have a prayer. We were worried about everybody. So that was a few days later.
And did Chad or Lori answer?
We called both of them. So.
And they were together?
Yes.
In that conversation, did Chad or Lori tell you where JJ was?
They didn't tell me where he was.
At some point, did you end up talking to Alex?
Yes.
And did you talk to Alex about your concerns with JJ?
I did.
Do you recall what Alex told you?
Yes. I asked him.
Judge, could I have some foundation as to when this conversation supposedly took place?
Objection based on foundation, Ms. Blake.
I'll ask some additional questions.
Thank you.
Do you recall approximately when you spoke with Alex about your concerns?
I think it was the day or two after Thanksgiving.
Do you recall where you spoke to him?
Yes, it was in Arizona, and we were behind the house that he just moved into, which was Suleiman's house. And there's a field there. We were walking and talking, and that's where I asked him.
Do you recall if anyone else was present for that conversation?
Melanie was there, and then shortly after that, Sulema showed up.
So, and when you say Melanie, was that Lori's niece?
Yes.
And what did Alex tell you in relation to where JJ was or to your concerns for JJ?
I just said, do I want to know where JJ was? And he said no. And then he proceeded to tell me about the police coming to their apartment, and I didn't understand why they would do that. So we talked a little bit about that.
But when you asked if you wanted to know where JJ was, his response was you didn't want to know.
That's right.
At some point, did you end up making a phone call to Chad and Lori on December 8th of 2019?
Yes.
Who was present when you made that phone call?
No one.
Did you record the phone call?
Yes.
Was someone there recording it for you?
No.
What device did you use to record it?
Cell phone.
Had law enforcement asked you to make this phone call?
No.
And you did, in fact, record it?
Correct.
Judge, I have what's been marked as State's Exhibit 42. It's a jump drive. I have a copy for counsel, and I would request to publish the first portion for identification purposes only.
All right. Before it's published, of course, we'll go through the question of admissibility. Mr. Pryor, is there any objection to Exhibit 42 being admitted?
I would have preferred a little more foundation, Judge, but at this point, I'm going to stipulate to the admission of the exhibit and allow her to move forward.
Okay. Exhibit 42 is admitted, but pending an additional or a first proffer that it is actually the exhibit Mr. Pryor believes it in the court improperly marked. In other words, Ms. Blake, if you just start a portion of it and let everyone confirm it's the call you're referring to.
Thank you, Your Honor. And that was actually my intention in order to lay more foundation. And it wants to give me difficulties. Let me try one of the other discs. Your Honor, if I may have just a moment.
You may.
Sorry about that technical problem. I think I have it figured out. Maybe not. Just. Okay, hopefully third time's a charm.
No.
There's more to come in the trial of Chad Daybell. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage right here from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.